We just passed the halfway point in the NHL season, and there are a ton of things to talk about. Quinn Hughes is winning the MVP. Nathan MacKinnon's a bust. Does the Winter Classic suck? Ottawa's making the playoffs. Leave Elias Pettersson alone. The Bruins suck. All right, they might not be that crazy, but let's jump into it. Welcome back to the channel, and like I said in the intro, there are tons of things that we could talk about that have happened in the NHL at this point in the year. In this video, I've broken it down to 10 topics that we need to talk about this year. Starting at number 1 are playoff teams from last year that were off to a garbage start this year. Both the Vancouver Canucks and the Boston Bruins are currently in a wild card spot at the time of this recording, and if you're a Boston Bruins fan, you probably can't feel too confident you're going to keep holding on to that spot. The Bruins did, however, finally win a game after being on a 6-game losing streak, but both Pittsburgh and Montreal are coming up behind them in the standings at the time of this recording. Is the drama in Vancouver ever going to come to an end? It's all JT Miller's fault. The Vancouver Canucks are currently 19, 13, and 10 with 48 points, with the Calgary Flames right behind them in the standings. The fall off from last year's Canucks is quite eye-opening, considering they primarily have the same team as last year with a few new added pieces. On top of that, you have the Elias Pettersson and JT Miller drama, which seems like it's never going to come to an end.
It hasn't been distracting you.
Oh my God. Next question.
There are some rumors that the Boston Bruins and Vancouver Canucks are possibly discussing a trade with one of these players. Now, I have to imagine it's probably going to be JT Miller that gets traded to Boston, but if he does go to Boston, that's going to leave a pretty big gap in the identity and the team as a whole for Vancouver. Now, last year's first round matchup against the Vancouver Canucks was the Nashville Predators, and if it weren't for a few lucky bounces, a hot goaltender, and honestly the play of Brock Besser, probably would have beaten the Vancouver Canucks. Nashville was not messing around this offseason by signing 3 of the biggest free agents of the summer in Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. But being the champs in free agency hasn't gotten them much this year. Now, the Preds were off to a garbage start, and they are currently 13, 22, and 7 with 33 points. That's only 3 points away from being dead last in the league. Then we get to the New York Rangers, and holy hell, let's talk about a drop-off. Last year's President's Trophy winners have fallen off a cliff this year, currently going 20, 20, and 2 with 42 points, which is actually only 4 points out of a wild card spot. But the drama with the Rangers goes back to last year's playoffs with a poor performance and a high cap hit from ex-captain Jacob Trouba, who ultimately got traded to the Anaheim Ducks this year with no retention. What? Then they put Barclay Goodrow on waivers to avoid his cap hit and his no-team trade list. He was eventually claimed by the San Jose Sharks, who were on his no-team trade list, and that money is believed to be used in the re-signing of Igor Shesterkin and Alexis Lafreniere. Chris Drury's latest issue has been the play of Mika Zibanejad, who's been mostly MIA this year. We've never heard that one before. I mean, honestly, he's scored a couple goals lately, but Mika Zibanejad has been struggling for quite some time. While there have been some surprising fall-offs this year, there have been equally impressive surprising teams, some we didn't expect to see at all. First, we have the Minnesota Wild, who were off to a hot start this year. They're currently 4th in the league in points, 2nd in the Central Division, and look like a real contender for this year. I don't think I've ever said that about a Minnesota team ever in my life. They have been bitten by the injury bug as of late, but come playoff time, I fully expect this team to be ready to go with the depth they have in their lineup. The Minnesota Wild look insanely good this year. Then we get to the Winnipeg Jets, and I don't think anyone's really surprised here. I mean, I'm a little surprised at the start they had and where they currently are in the standings. They went 14-1 in their first 15 games to start the year and are currently sitting at the top of the Central Division with 61 points. They're right behind the Washington Capitals in the league standings, and I'm not all that too surprised because last year's team was an absolute wagon heading into the playoffs, and they looked like they were getting ready to do some damage. But then they ran into the Colorado Avalanche. Well, I don't really know where the hell Connor Hellebuyck went, but we know how that thing played out, and it was not pretty for the Winnipeg Jets. Connor Hellebuyck is playing absolutely insane this year, and he looks like a sure lock for the Vezina Trophy. So if you're a betting man, you know where to put your money. And then the biggest surprise this year has got to be the play of the Washington Capitals. No one, and I mean absolutely no one, expected them to be at the top of the league right now. They're currently 28, 10, and 5 and sit in first place in the league. Last year, they barely even got into the playoffs and eventually did get swept by the New York Rangers. I didn't think they had a snowball chance in hell to make the playoffs or the push they're making right now, but somehow this team found its legs. They brought in players like Pierre-Luc Dubois from the LA Kings in a 1-for-1 trade for Darcy Kemper, a trade that was actually questionable but has worked out pretty damn well. They traded for Logan Thompson with the Golden Knights. They picked up Andrew Mangiapane from the Calgary Flames, and they got back Lars Eller in a trade with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They have gotten some great play from up and down their lineup. I mean, they're playing absolutely insane. Players like Connor McMichael, Tom Wilson, Alexi Protas, just to name a few. And there's one name I haven't even mentioned yet, and that's Ovechkin. Honestly, did anyone think Ovechkin was going to break Gretzky's goal scoring record this year at all? I did. No, you didn't. Honestly, I didn't think Ovechkin had it in him this year, especially considering how the way his year ended last year. I thought maybe he'd get 20, 25 goals this year and we see him break it next year in the 2025-26 season. And holy hell have I been wrong.
He does it again!
Now he hasn't broken it yet, but he's getting pretty damn close. Ovechkin had 15 goals to start the year before he broke his leg in a game against Utah back in November, a game where he had 2 goals and was on his way to a hat trick. Thanks a lot, Utah. Ovechkin was sidelined for over a month and returned right around the start of the new year in a game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And guess what? He scored in his return. Alexander Ovechkin currently has 873 goals, which is only 21 goals shy of Gretzky's all-time record and 22 goals away from breaking it. Can he do it this year? I hope so. The man is on a mission and is currently sitting at 19 goals, 11 assists, and 30 points at the time of this recording, and it's only been halfway through the season. Now, the scoring race has been crazy this year with tons of ebbs and flows. There's been players at the start of the year that had a bunch of points that I didn't think would get, players like Kyle McCarr. And then Kirill Kaprizov came out of nowhere and started racking up a bunch of points. I'm not even playing. This is probably one of the crazy years I've seen as far as point getters. Now, Kaprizov has been out of the Minnesota lineup since December 23rd, and up until that point, he was scoring at an incredible rate. It was looking like he was going to win that thing for sure. But then Nathan MacKinnon woke up, and holy hell, that man has been on a tear in the league. MacKinnon is now leading the race and sits at the top of the league with 68 points coming from his 15 goals and 53 assists. He's had 2 games this year that tallied 5 points each. Right behind him is Leon Draisaitl with 63 points, and then there's another Colorado Avalanche player by the name of Mikko Rantanen with 60 points of his own. Goddamn, Colorado. I don't know what to say, man. Behind Rantanen, there's Mitch Marner and Nikita Kucherov, who are tied at 59 points, and then there's Connor McDavid with 58 points. Boys, I don't think you realize how good we have it this year. There are multiple players that could end up with 110 points when this thing is all said and done. If I have to pick someone to win the Rocket or the Hart, I've got to give it to Nathan MacKinnon right now because that dude is playing absolutely insane. Was this year the death of the Winter Classic? I mean, I know we got one coming up next year, but are we really excited about an outdoor game in Miami next year? This year's Winter Classic was an absolute dud. I, for one, am sick and tired of seeing the same old teams get these games year in and year out. I get that original 6 teams have a huge fan base, but if they keep feeding fans these games and these matchups, it's going to lose its luster. If it hasn't already, especially when one of those teams is absolute dog shit. Now look, I get the NHL wanted to promote its new star in Connor Bedard, but did we really need to watch the Chicago Blackhawks get absolutely pumped by the St. Louis Blues, especially on New Year's Eve? What the hell happened to New Year's Day? Who the hell made that decision? This year's Winter Classic drew in a whopping 920,000 viewers, which is an all-time low. That's 16% lower than last year's Golden Knights and Seattle Kraken game. So how do we fix the Winter Classic? Well, for one, let's actually start by putting teams on the ice that we actually want to watch. Maybe a matchup between the best teams and the biggest stars like the Colorado Avalanche and the Edmonton Oilers. Maybe we make it an outdoor tournament with a couple games. Maybe something like the Four Nations Face-Off. I seriously feel like we could have fixed this thing a long time ago, but for some reason the NHL just can't pull this thing off anymore. I, for one, would love to see the Colorado Avalanche and Edmonton Oilers go at it in an outdoor game. I would actually spend a lot of money to go watch an international tournament like the Four Nations Face-Off. All right, we got to talk about this year's Calder race because this year it is no joke. Now, I've made a bunch of videos about the players that are in this race already, and if you want to check those out, go visit my YouTube page or click on one of these videos up in here. And since we're talking about it in my page, do me a solid, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, turn those notifications on because I'm always dropping videos about the NHL and the players in it this year. Now, I've already made my pick for the Calder this year, but that doesn't mean I'm right. I've upset many, and I do mean many, both Flyers and Canadian fans. But you gotta admit, this year's race is pretty damn entertaining. We got kids in the league right now playing at completely different levels. Lane Hudson is absolutely insane. Michkov is a natural goal scorer. Celebrating looks like he's from a different freaking planet. Regardless of the outcome, I think every franchise involved in this race needs to be grateful for the skill that's being displayed on the ice. Look, will I be upset if Celebrating doesn't win this thing? Yeah, but that'll be for like 5 minutes. One rookie season isn't going to define a player's career, and I think we all need to pump the homer brakes when we're talking about these rookies and the players on our teams. Be happy that you have a player in the mix, and enjoy the talent that's being displayed on the ice. Because honestly, it doesn't really matter who wins. The league wins with all these players on the ice, and if the league wins, then we all win, all right? Will this be the year that Canada finally brings the cup back home? I don't even want to say home because it's been living in the States for quite some time. Now, right now, there are 4 Canadian teams in playoff spots with 3 more fighting to get in. So this could actually be the year that Canada wins the Stanley Cup. I highly doubt it's going to be Toronto, but there's a good possibility that it could happen. Edmonton was one win away from making it happen last year. I told you weren't going to win that thing. And this year, the Oilers are looking like they're trying to get back into the dance. But then there's teams like the Winnipeg Jets who are playing absolutely insane this year. They could be the team that represents Canada in a Stanley Cup final. That is, if they don't have another crazy collapse in the first round, all they have to do is get past the Vegas Golden Knights, the Minnesota Wild, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Dallas Stars. And the Oilers. Yeah, that ain't happening. The West is no joke, but I think one team could actually get there. If I had to pick one Canadian team to make a Stanley Cup Finals appearance, I got to go back to the Edmonton Oilers. I've talked my trash in the past already, but I can't count out a hungry Connor McDavid and a Leon Draisaitl. I will say this, though, about the other Canadian teams. I would love to see you guys get back into the playoffs and make this thing a little bit more international and a little bit more interesting. I even think the Leafs will make the Eastern Conference Finals this year. Just kidding. Speaking of the playoffs, we have to talk about the wild card race because it's going to be crazy again. At least in the East, it's going to be crazy. Right now, Boston and Columbus hold the wild card spots, but there are 4 teams right behind them. There's Montreal, there's Pittsburgh, Ottawa, and Detroit, and they're all within reach of a playoff spot. The Sens, Habs, and Wings all have games in hand and could make this race very interesting down the stretch. It's going to start becoming must-watch hockey because every game and every point are absolutely crucial to this race and to their playoff hopes. We can't talk about the playoffs without mentioning teams who have no shot at making the playoffs this year at all. I'm talking to you, Buffalo. Hey, we're going though, right? Are you serious? I know I just mentioned the Sens, but I'm pretty confident you guys are not getting in this year. But come on, man. Are you guys ever going to turn this thing around? I had hopes for the Sabres early on this year, and I can say the same thing about the Ottawa Senators, but man, things just do not change for these two teams. I think the Islanders just like to torture their fans. I made a prediction about the Islanders early on this year, and what do you know? Look who was right. But seriously, I think we're all a little tired of seeing these historically good teams. And when I say historically, I'm talking about the teams in the 80s. 4 times, bro. 4 times. Just be bad teams. And there's a good enough team in Ottawa right now that has a good enough roster that could make a push. But for whatever reason, all these teams just keep falling flat on their face. Get your shit together already. Lastly, we need to talk about the teams that have made midseason coaching changes this year. The Boston Bruins kicked things off earlier this year by firing Jim Montgomery after the Bruins started the season 8-9-3. Why? They eventually replaced him with old assistant coach Joe Sacco, which is a move that no one actually really gets. If you want my opinion on that, you can go check out this video right here because honestly, the Bruins are still struggling right now and they haven't improved with Joe Sacco pretty much at all. I, like many others at the time, thought this move was unnecessary. Why? The move that needed to be made was the move at the top in firing Don Sweeney. Since Montgomery's been fired, the Bruins have gone 13-10-2. Not so much a big improvement in the 2.5 months that Joe Sacco's been there. I don't know what Sweeney's expectations were with this move, but the Bruins were on a losing streak up until recently where they did finally win a game, and there were chants in the crowd of fire Sweeney. Unfortunately, the firing of Jim Montgomery spelled bad news for ex-St. Louis Blues head coach Drew Bannister. The Blues started the season going 9-12-1 when Boston let Montgomery go. Then they fired Drew Bannister, and then they brought in Jim Montgomery back. He was an assistant coach for St. Louis at one point in time under Craig Berube. Since Montgomery's joined the Blues, they've gone 11-7-3 with a total record of 20-19-4 and 44 points. That's just 2 points away from a wild card spot. When we look back at these teams' 2 decisions, I think we're all going to agree that the Blues came out on top on this one. Then there's the firing in Chicago of Luke Richardson. I don't think anyone's surprised by this move one bit. The Hawks needed to take a step this year. They have all the pieces in the world to be a competitive team, but for whatever reason, the message was not getting through in that room one bit. The Blackhawks are dead last in the league again with a 14-26-2 record. At the time of his firing, were 8-16-2. With the future star in Connor Bedard and other players coming up through the Rockford program, the Blackhawks needed to make a change in that room and brought in head coach Anders Sorensen from the Rockford Ice Hogs. Not much has changed, but I honestly don't think Sorensen will last past this year. I have to think Chicago is going to do whatever they can to get David Carl away from Denver. Just park that over there. Lastly, we have to talk about the firing of Derek Lalonde and the hiring of Todd McLellan. Lalonde's Red Wings went 13-17-4 at the time of his firing and were 7th in the Atlantic Division. This is Todd McLellan's second time with the Red Wings as he was an assistant coach under Mike Babcock. Remember that crazy bastard? After McLellan's time in Detroit, he then went on to the San Jose Sharks where he made a name for himself in the league as a head coach. Todd has a knack for turning bad teams into playoff teams, And while the Sharks weren't necessarily a bad team or a non-playoff team, he did make them better. After being let go from San Jose, he then went on to Edmonton to be Connor McDavid's first NHL head coach and led them into the playoffs in the 16-17 season. McClellan then went on to the LA Kings, where he got them into the playoffs in the 21-22 season and the 23 season. They lost both times to his old team, the Edmonton Oilers, in back-to-back playoff series. Now, is this a good move for the Red Wings? Yep. Since McClellan has been hired by the Red Wings, they've gone 7-1, which includes a 7-game winning streak, and are now currently 6th in the Atlantic Division, which is 2 points shy of a wild card spot. If Todd McClellan can get the Red Wings back in the playoffs, it's going to save the Red Wings fans a ton of heartache, because they got so damn close last year, and the NHL needs to have the Red Wings in the playoffs every single year. When we look back at the winners and losers of these midseason coaching changes, I think Detroit and St. Louis comes out on top, hands down. We still have half the season left, and we might see more firings before this year's even over, but I gotta imagine these two changes are gonna affect these teams drastically. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think the Winter Classic needs a total and completely new revamp? Who do you have win the Calder? Who do you have win the Rocket? All that good stuff. Let me know down in the comments. And like always, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and I will catch you boys in the next one. Peace out, homies.